Hi, Grandma. Thank you for joining me in this interview today. As you know, I'm taking an online AP Human Geography course, and this chapter we're learning about immigration, or just migration in general. So I have a few questions about our family immigration.
Right, the Rogers family.
Yeah.
And my name is Elizabeth Ann Rogers Rennick. So I'm related to Micaela Rennick as her grandmother. Yeah. All right, do you want to know the story of the Rogers family?
Yes.
Okay, well we'll start out the Rogers family with William and Mary. That's a very popular English name, you know, William and Mary. Just about 15% of the English people are called either William or Mary or something, and we have William and Mary College, but that's beside the point. Okay, William and Mary, they were living first in Blackburn, and they had John, Edward. They had about 4 or 5 kids, and John was the oldest, and they were living for a while in Blackburn, but then they moved to Flint, Wales. So actually, are we English or Welsh now? You know, I guess we're still English. But a strange thing, when they were living in Wales, the name of the last name changed a little bit, because when we were living in England, the name was Rogers. But when they were living in Wales, it was Rodgers. But it was the same family, because you could tell by all the children and when they were born that it was the same family, you know. So,
So who's William and Mary related
William
to?
and Mary this is my dad, William Rogers, named after his grandfather. And he's one of the children that came over on the boat. And they came on the boat, a cattle boat called the Utopia. And he was 9 years old when he came over, 8 or 9 years old. And he had a couple of his sisters that were born in this country. And then I think my Uncle Joe was the last one to be born in England. So, and there was a sister, Sarah, who died on board the cattle boat. She got dysentery, which is like diarrhea, and they couldn't stop it, so she became very dehydrated, and she passed away shortly after. So, anyway, we'll go back to my father. He was living in Blackburn. He had been born in Blackburn, and then the family moved to Wales for a while. And it was they had a nice little place. It was a farm, a little country home, and it was a country inn. And he worked for a very wealthy guy who had sheep and everything, a nice farm. And and I think they also had some people that boarded with him. He had a wife named Mary, and she passed away. And so then he, didn't have a chance to meet many people. You don't meet many people when you're just way off there in a little isolated farm. So along came a cook, and he married this cook, and she was not nice to his kids. And she used to beat him all the time, and quite severely. And of course, William was not aware a lot of this happening, because he was off tending the horses all the time. He was a coachman, and it was hard to be a coachman and help out on the farm and take care of the horses and all that. So he didn't see what was happening until afterwards. Well, one day, Mary beat John so bad that he ran away from home. And he ran back to Blackburn, where his uncle John was living. That was Williams, not this William, but Grandpa Williams' brother. So he ran back there, and by the time he got there, he didn't have he had holes in his shoes, and his feet were bloody, and he hadn't eaten for a while, and he was in bad shape. So even though John had not very much money and a large family, he took him in. And I actually visited the home there over in Blackburn. It's a little row home, and I had an address, and I went to see the address. And a row home is like all the homes are in a row, and they share a common wall. So if you're on the end, you might have just one common wall, but if you're in the middle, you have two common walls, so there's somebody here and somebody here. It's like a bunch of apartments all together, but they call them row houses. And at the time that John moved in with his uncle, there were, counting John, 9 people living in that house. And I actually was outside taking a picture of the house, and this lady came by who was the owner of the house, and she said, "Would you like to come in and see it?" Because I told her the story of my uncle. And so I said yes, and I came in, and I could take pictures. I took pictures, and it was very rustic, and it was like just a very plain staircase, like somebody just nailed something together. and there was 2 rooms upstairs, and then there was a big kitchen and a bedroom downstairs. So there's just 4 rooms in this whole house for 9 people. And then outside the kitchen door, there was what you would call about the size of a patio, but it had stone walls all around it, and that was their outdoor space. He lived there for a while, and then his William came to get his son, and Uncle John said, "No, you're not taking your son back with you." He says, "He's staying here. You're not taking him. He's not safe there with your wife." So anyway, William went back without him. And so then, when John grew up there in Blackburn, he found he was looking for a job. And in those days, you start out very young as a worker. And he met Sally there, and she got married to him. And this was in Whittley Woods, now Whittle, near Preston. And I actually went to see the factory, and it was a big place, but it was for sale when I went there back in when did I go? 2007 or 8 or something like that. They worked there for a while, and what happened was there was this big push to get water piped in to the homes there. But the factory would have had to pay the most money because they were the most taxed. And, they were the wealthiest people there, so they expected them to pay a good portion of the water being piped in. Now, up to this point, they only had, water coming through a huge pipe that was continually running all the time, and people used to just go down the hill. It's kind of like Jack and Jill went down the hill. And anyway, they had these buckets, and they used to come up, carry these buckets of water up the hill to their homes. So people said it's too hot to carry all those buckets of water up to their homes. So they should have water piped in, but who's going to pay for it? So they were going to have a vote for it, and the owner of the factory did not want to pay the money, so he said if anybody got caught voting for this pipe stuff, that they were going to, get fired. Uncle John, and they called him Jack, was talking to one of his fellow factory workers, and he said, well, It's a bummer, he says, or I think he said it's a bugger. It's a bugger that when people can't vote the way they want to. This owner of the factory overheard him. So what he did was he started cutting down the number of looms for him to work. And so you got paid according to how many looms you ran. And so when they cut these number of looms down, he didn't have enough money to support his family. So he didn't know what he was going to do. And my grandmother, Sarah, but they called her Sally, she said she had been storing money away in this little kettle, a teapot on the shelf for years. And she just took a few pennies out of every salary and storing it away so she had the money. And it was lucky for them that she did that because they had money when they sold everything to buy a passage on a cattle boat. Not a really good boat, you know, but anyway, we'd get them across in the ocean. And of course it was a rough ride, and I already told you that they lost a child. But when they got there, they were over there for 2 weeks, and they had gotten a job in another factory in New Bedford. And of course, this was again running looms and stuff, and working in a garment factories, cloth factories.
And around what date is this?
I think it was in the early 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
But then they had, shortly after that, a couple of weeks after they got there, the factories went on strike.
Yeah.
So that made it very hard. But of course they had relatives there in New Bedford. That was one of the reasons why they came. So they had to split up the family, and they had big families.
What relatives? Like
they had sisters and cousins and stuff like that, and aunts and uncles. So they had part of the family go to live with one aunt and uncle, and another part of the family go live with another. And then after the strike was done, they went back to work. And my grandmother was very small. She was like probably not much more than 5 feet tall. But when she was young, she was small, and she worked in a factory. And she was so small they had to build like a platform for her to stand on, so she could reach the, I guess I forget what they call it. I guess the looms or something. And so. That's how she worked. Since she was 9 years old, she used to work there. And then when my father got to be in the 15, I think he was, what grade he was in, maybe he was younger than that, they took him right out of school the day that he was turned old enough to work, and they put him in the factory because they needed his money. And in those days, all the kids had to turn their money into their parents.
So, like, once they stopped living with relatives, what type of housing did
they had tenement housing, you know, which is the...
Yeah, I learned about this in history.
Yeah, and 3 families, one on top of the other, and the stairway goes like that, because I used to peddle milk. And I used to go around the stairways peddling milk. So is there anything else you need to know? Or my father actually had a very good voice, so he got paid to sing in the choir. So he always went to the church every Sunday because they needed the money for the choir too. I think he got 50 cents to pay in a choir, which was really a lot of money, you know.
Yeah. And then was your mom... Your mom their family was already living in America?
Well, my mom's family had a very similar story, but yeah, they came around 1900.
Oh, so they came.
They came over too, and I was surprised because I saw some immigration papers, and one of the officers there asked my grandfather, how many children do you have? And he said 4 living, which surprised me because I had always thought that just had 4 children, but they must have had more than 4 children because
Yeah.
that's what their answer was. They had 4 living.
So, what generation was your mother? Like,
Well, my mother was about 17 years younger than my father.
no, but like what, like how many people before then, before they came to America?
Well, my mother was born in America.
Yeah.
But my both sets of grandmothers and both sets of grandfathers were born in England. Yeah.
How old were her parents when they came over?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I've forgotten if I ever knew, but I can tell you where she came from, and I have her address.
Where did she come from?
She came from. Oh man, you're asking somebody that has a hard time now. She comes from. My grandfather came from Macclesfield, and she came from Oldham. Oldham, and you pronounce it Oldham.
Oldham, England.
Yeah, Oldham, yeah. So Macclesfield and Oldham aren't that far apart. So.
Do you know, did they come over as children, or did they come over already married?
I suspect that no, they came over single because they met each other like at church or somewhere. I forget where.
That's interesting.
But yeah.
What were their names?
Henshaw was her name. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Hey, thank you, Grandma.
Yeah, I hope that helps spark a little interest in our family.
Yeah.